I guess I have a couple of seconds left to say good morning, but in general, it's going to be good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce, which you probably already knew that. This is our listening session today, our candidate panel with the riding of Cowichan-Malahat-Langford. We're going to introduce the candidates to you in just a moment. The format for this, as I mentioned, is a listening session, which means this is not something where there's going to be candidates with rebuttal comments back and forth to each other. So it's not a debate format. This is a chance for the candidates to state fully and completely what their policy and their position is on the issues that we're going to raise today. This session is also being recorded. And if you want to go back and watch it over and over and over again, you're welcome to do that. And the three previous ones we've done have also been recorded too. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I live and work in the ancestral territories of the Lekwungen-speaking Coast Salish nations, the Songhees and the Esquimalt, and we are pleased and proud to be living and working with them every day. I'd also like to acknowledge those who are marking the high holy days of Rosh Hashanah and celebrating Yom Kippur today, and all of our best wishes to all of you. So this is the panel for Cowichan-Malahat-Langford. I'm going to introduce today's panel to you individually, and they will then have 2 minutes to make opening statements. Joining us today, the candidate for the New Democratic Party is Alistair MacGregor. On behalf of the Conservative Party of Canada, Alana DeLong. Lia Versaevel is running for the Green Party of Canada, and Blair Herbert is the candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada. And to get us underway with 2 minutes opening remarks, Alistair MacGregor, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Bruce, and thank you to all of the listeners who are joining in to us today. It's deeply appreciated that the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce is giving us this forum to speak to you so that you can make an informed decision for this election to the 44th Parliament. I'm Alistair MacGregor. I have been honored to be the Member of Parliament for the great riding of Cowichan-Malahat-Langford since 2015, and the voters here again placed their trust on my shoulders in 2019. During my record as Member of Parliament, I have tried my hardest to always make sure that this riding has a strong voice in Parliament. I've tried to make sure that the issues that matter to you as constituents are always front and center in Ottawa, and that my office has always been responsive to your needs, particularly when it comes to that help needed to deal with the labyrinth that sometimes exists in navigating the federal bureaucracy. I've been proud to introduce several private members' bills that I think reflect the priorities of this riding. And I also want to acknowledge that the last 18 months have been an incredibly difficult time for so many individuals who have had their job losses and for small businesses who have really struggled to get through that. I think looking ahead, we have several paths open to us as to what decisions we're going to take in Ottawa, decisions that are going to have huge ramifications for you, your family, and your small business. And they have to be done in the context of a changing climate and a lot of anxiety and uncertainty about affordability and the housing crisis. I look forward to having this opportunity to place on the record what my thoughts are on the policies that we need in Ottawa and the different changes of direction that we need. And I look forward to the discussion that's coming ahead. I hope that you learn a lot from it and you can make that informed choice. And look forward to hearing from my other candidates on this. Thank you.
Alistair, thank you very much. Up next is the candidate of the Conservative Party of Canada, Alana DeLong. Alana, the floor is yours. Oh, you're on mute, Alana. We are going to have T-shirts made up that say you're on mute, but we're still listening. That's what, yeah. Anyway, go for it.
Hi, and thank you to the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce for hosting this candidate panel discussion. My name is Alana DeLong, and I'm a resident of beautiful Thetis Island in the Cowichan Valley. I'm also the Conservative candidate in this general election. For the last 14 years of my work life, I represented a varied community of constituents as their MLA. The community encompassed the economically challenged, those with mental and physical challenges, those facing serious addiction and alcohol health challenges, seniors, and working families in the middle class. This community was my life, and I learned how to help my constituents deal with their needs. It's this experience that I offer to the constituents of Cowichan-Malahat-Langford. The Conservatives' recovery plan is designed to rebuild Canada's economy as we emerge from the pandemic, regain the 1 million jobs lost, rebuild the industries and small businesses that suffered, and offer mental health initiatives to those whose mental health and addiction challenges were worsened during this time. We have specific plans to slow the rise of inflation and make the cost of living and the cost of housing affordable again for all Canadians. We have a strong plan for climate change that meets our Paris Accord targets, enables Canadians to design their own plan for reducing their carbon footprint, and invests in building the structures needed to take our country into a future beyond those targets. This election is about how we get Canada back on its feet and rebuild our economy, our jobs, and our way of life. There's a simple choice. Do we continue down the path of higher deficit, debt, and dependence on a government dictating our everyday lives? Or do we move forward with a government that represents Canadians' ability, respects Canadians' ability, creativity, work ethic, and compassion? Thank you.
Thank you, Alana, very much. Up next is the candidate for the Green Party of Canada, Lia Versaevel. Lia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bruce. And thank you for saying Lia. It really isn't Lisa. Hachka, and welcome. I come today from the Cowichan territory. I'm in the city of Duncan this morning. My hope in this election is to acknowledge through the Green Party platform that we are in a crisis. We are in a state of emergency. The IPCC has recently released its report, bringing to our attention, as though we really needed to be reminded, that we are in a code red situation for humanity. This, of course, affects us incredibly here on this island. This island is so dependent not only on the mainland, but also on the entire Pacific Rim and the global economy. And we know that climate does not only affect us. We experienced an incredible heat dome at the beginning of July. This resulted in the deaths of many people. It also resulted in a wake-up call to so many farmers who are trying to keep their animal crops alive. This is an urgent time for action. And yet we know that we must move forward with hope. We must bring along our children and encourage them to continue to learn and study and take place in the economy of the future. We need to move into a green economy. We cannot place the dollar sign above all other values. We know that we must take care of each other. This pandemic has revealed to us our great potential. We know that we can work from home. We know that we have an incredible literate population in Canada that will take us forward. We know that we will be able to bring our values to the island and make this another green seat.
Great. Thank you, Lia. Not Lisa. Thank you, Lia. And our final opening remark today is from Blair Herbert, the candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada. Blair, the floor is yours for 2 minutes.
Firstly, Bruce, thanks for hosting this event, and welcome to everyone who is joining us either live or later on. Now, we're only a handful of days away from the election, so I'm going to assume that you've already heard lots of platforms that are down to your final thinking of making your choice. So I'm going to take my 2-minute introduction and share you why you should vote for me. First of all, let's talk climate change and the future of the environment. If the future of the environment is of top concern to you, as it is to me, then you should vote Liberal. We have a top-rated climate plan in the country. You likely saw on the news just a couple of days ago, Andrew Weaver, former leader of the BC Green Party, endorsing the plan as the plan he always wished for. Another independent analysis gave the Liberals top mark on their plan, described as largely ineffective and unnecessarily costly. Secondly, I want to talk about the economy. As a local and small business person myself, I am a member of my chamber here in the Cowichan, and I understand the challenges you have faced during this pandemic. I had to close my doors as well. I also understand how innovative, creative, and powerful. Employed 8.4 million people in Canada, and small and medium-sized businesses contributed more than 1/3 of Canada's GOP. We are a very powerful group. Yet, despite these numbers, you have likely heard some party leaders, including that of the current MP, make comment that if he were elected, more work would be carried out by the government. If you saw his interview on CBC a couple of nights ago, he talked about taking subsidies away from private companies, transitioning to the green economy because they have lots of money. In this interview, Mr. Singh equated profit with greed. I equate profit with survival. Thank you.
Blair, thank you very much. We had a little bit of instability in your signal, by the way, Blair. So if we get you in that circumstance again, I might get you to turn your camera off and keep the audio on. It was just a little bit garbled a couple of times, but we generally heard you pretty loud and clear. So we're going to move into some questions now. This session that we're doing today is a partnership that we at the Chamber are doing along with the Vancouver Island Construction Association, the Urban Development Institute of the Capital Region, the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority, and Destination Greater Victoria. So one of the issues that's been prominent in this country, in this region in particular, over the last number of years, pre-COVID, during COVID, and certainly as we recover from COVID, is finding employees. Workers are having a very difficult time filling the jobs they have available to continue to continue their business and bolster it going forward. So all sectors, certainly construction, tourism, technology, healthcare, engineering, name it. Everybody's got a problem with workers right now. So the question to you is, to fill the gap in the workforce, will you and your party commit to working with industry to recruit and train people who see these sectors, such as construction and tech and tourism, as a career of choice, especially among people who are underrepresented in those industries? That's the question to you. Let's begin with Blair Herbert, please. Blair, for about a minute and a half, if you would, please. The floor is yours.
Sure, thanks for the question. I have to remember to mute because I didn't in the last one we were talking about. Yes, definitely. One of the issues that we have, of course, is housing for the workforce that we have. One of the problems that we have in the Cowichan and in Victoria is a lot of the local workers don't have places to live because the housing has become so expensive. And that is an issue. And of course, once we're looking at solving that issue, that's sort of a long-term thing. What we do need to do, I think, is to sort of retrain a workforce. Once you sort of shut down the economy, for 18 months, when we look at the restaurant industry as an example, a lot of those people left the restaurant industry and are now working in other industries. And so we're looking at everybody coming into the restaurant industry now is not everybody, but a lot of them are new workers, and they have to be retrained in that industry. And this is going to take a while for everything to settle out. But the government can help with the retraining possibilities, apprenticeship type of work in the trades and that sort of thing, and we can get things up and moving again. To do that, we have to get through COVID, of course, and we are working on doing that on daily. And I think our exit out of COVID, of course, is getting everyone vaccinated. So that is still a bit of a hurdle that we have to get through. Let's
hold it there, Blair, if we could, just for the sake of time. We're going to move along with some other questions later on, and we are going to loop back on a few of the points that you made with another question. Lia, let's hand it over to you, please.
Thank you, Bruce. Yes, I would echo some of the remarks that were made. It's true that we have people who want to work. It's true that we have an incredibly intelligent and literate workforce. But there are so many pieces of this equation. People need to be able to live close to where they work. They don't want to commute for miles and miles. The pandemic showed us that it is possible for many jobs to be done from home. I'm incredibly proud of two of my adult children who work in the construction industry. One, my daughter, who was a health and safety officer in construction, and my son, who was doing renovations on homes throughout the Cowichan Valley for the last couple of years. We know that there's a materials shortage as well. There are so many things at play, and also the cost of materials has gone through the roof. We are part of a global economy, and we need to reopen our borders safely and carefully so that we can access resources from around the world. We also need to stop saddling children with incredible student debt. We need to step up and make sure that we pay people to go to school, that we allow them to train in trades as well as in academics. This is the lifeblood of our economy. We need to support young workers, and we need to transition people who are working in oil and gas, who are pipe fitters and welders, over into the new green economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Lia. Alana, the floor is yours for about 90 seconds, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Bruce. Going door knocking, which is a big part of my life of late. I've been to thousands and thousands of doors. I often came to doors where there were small business owners who could not get workers, and so our recovery plan is very pointed in this direction to recover this. The other thing is that I also learned when I was working provincially, that once someone was off work for 6 months, it was very difficult for them to make the transition back into work. And so our plan has a 25% subsidy for the salary of net new hires for 6 months after CEWS expires, and also is 50% of the salary for those who have been unemployed for 6 months or more. And so we really need to change from a credit card economy back into a paycheck economy.
Great. Thank you, Alana. And Alistair MacGregor, over to you.
Thank you, Bruce. I guess the short answer to your question is yes, I'd definitely be willing to work with industry. I think it's also important to maybe include labor as well. I think sort of a three-part organization in tackling this problem, where government is working with industry and labor to try and identify where the skills shortages are. I mean, I think we have to look at this from a worker's perspective. It's a very competitive market out there trying to get labor. So workers are going to look at what the wages are, what the housing costs are, what the transportation options are. These are all factoring in people's minds when they are choosing where they want to live and work. So we have to address a number of things. Absolutely on the skills shortage, I think we're going to have to address it with immigration, looking at finding ways to recognize people's experience and skills level. We are going to have to help the next generation of people who are struggling under burdensome levels of tuition debt by freeing up some of that tuition debt, making sure that we are not charging interest on tuition so that new graduates have a leg up when they are getting into the workforce and are not encumbered by that debt burden. We also have to make sure that those investments in training are done. And I would agree with my other candidates too. The housing crisis absolutely must be tackled. If people cannot afford to live in the communities where small businesses are operating, we will never ever solve this problem. Thank you.
Great, Alistair, thank you very much. We're going to loop back on the housing thing in a couple of minutes, but I wanted to go somewhere else that kind of relates to workforce too. We've known that one of the principal sources for workforce in this country for generations has been immigration. Immigration, of course, has been held up for the last 18 months, but we need to have that in place. So fewer people have been able to come to this country, obviously. Can you confirm that on behalf of your party, you will work to ensure that Canada returns to having a robust immigration program, which is needed to grow this economy in which we are living currently? Alana, let's begin with you, please. Oh, you're on mute, Alana. There's just no nice way to say that.
No. Thank you very much. Yes, immigration is very important to our economy and to the success of Canada, and but it's not enough just to simply set an immigration level without an actual plan. And our plan will have three priorities to it. We're going to be welcoming the best and the brightest from around the world to fill critical gaps and robustly grow our economy. And we're going to be also offering refuge, but only to those who are heroic human rights defenders and those fleeing persecution who would enrich our national life. And we also need to be able to strengthen our Canadian families by uniting them with their loved ones. So immigration is something that Canada needs. We need those workers, but we need to prioritize the workers that we need.
Thank you, Alana. Lia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bruce. I think that it's probably all over social media now that I am a first-generation Canadian. My parents came here after the Second World War. My mom was one of 9 kids in her family who came to Halifax. Pretty interesting photographs. And immigration has been the backbone of this country. We've also looked at temporary work visas that have gone on hold during the pandemic, and how critical these visas are to people who come and work not only in agricultural sectors, but also in tourism. So when we start to rebuild our economy, when we start to open up again to the world, we need to look at how those temporary work visas operate. One of my children was able to go to Australia on a work study visa. Sadly for me, she stayed there. However, this is an opportunity that people are looking to come to Canada and see how an incredible country like this, particularly this island, operates. And hopefully many of them will stay and increase their skill levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alistair, over to you for 90 seconds, please.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce, and an excellent question. I think I'll probably include a little bit in my previous answer. Yes, we do need that robust immigration system. We need to have those skill sets present here in Canada, because if you look at the demographic trend lines, we are simply not able to fulfill the labor shortage that currently exists. So let's look, and the last 18 months have been terrible. I mean, my constituency office is still active and working right now, helping people with casework issues, and immigration has been hit with a ton of bricks. There are just backlogs everywhere in every single stream. The temporary foreign worker program is one that has been accessed a lot, and so the kinds of improvements I would like to see, and to the credit of the current Liberal government, they did start a pilot project in this. I would like to see for temporary foreign workers, especially those that start forming repeated relationships with employers, demonstrate that they are growing an attachment to the community where they're working. I would like to see more pathways to permanent residency and to citizenship. Here on Vancouver Island, we are very dependent on the tourism industry, and a lot of tourism relies also on people who are coming here on working holiday visas. So yeah, when we're thinking of the word robust, it means looking at all of these important streams and that they are being matched with what industry currently needs.
Thank you, Alistair. Blair, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Bruce. I've been a small business person now for 37 years, but one of the careers I had prior to that was as an immigration officer back in the late 70s and early 80s, where we were resettling refugees from the Vietnam War. And so, I'm fairly familiar with the immigration file. Right now, we are bringing in, or have targeted to bring in, about 400,000 immigrants into this country in the next year. And of course, our numbers fell off because our borders were closed really for the last 18 months. So there was not very much immigration over the last while. But we have to do this for a couple of reasons. One is that we need skilled workers, and a lot of the immigrants that we take in are under that category. There's also family reunification, of course, which is a big one. But as far as the trained workers go, we have to, I remember back a few years ago, we were doing worker fairs in different places in the world, looking for people to come here. I remember the shortage of heavy duty mechanics at one time was very, very high. And one of the issues that we have here when they do get to Canada is having their credentials recognized in Canada, the same as they would be in Romania or in Britain or wherever they happen to be coming from. And that is an issue that is sometimes largely a provincial issue. Just think of the College of Physicians and Surgeons, which is provincial, which license doctors here once they get here. And I think we really have to have a look at that, because you bring over a doctor from South Africa as an example, and he ends up driving cab for 6 months. Not the best use of his talents, for sure. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Blair. I want to pick up on that point, which other candidates have mentioned as well. Yeah, immigration is a federal matter. It's done by the Federal Department of Immigration. But the recognition of those credentials when that person arrives in BC is at a provincial level. So that is where you get that's like the two, they don't align. It would be ideal if somehow when a person comes to this country with the skill sets that we need, whether it's healthcare, tech, a trade, engineering, whatever it might be, that they are recognized before they get here so they can begin work right away. So can you talk to me, please, about how your party could help make that happen? And Alistair, let's begin with you, please.
Yeah, this question is actually quite personal for me because my wife is a permanent resident. She's an Australian citizen. She first came to Canada under the British Columbia Provincial Nominee Program. She was a speech therapist, and there was a major shortage of speech therapists here on Vancouver Island. So she got bumped up to the front of the line because she had the province of British Columbia, the government, actually step in and act as her sponsor, which actually led to a very streamlined immigration process. I think it was all said and done in about 6 months' time. And given the fact that she was an Australian citizen, it did allow for her to come into the country rather quickly. But I would agree with you there, Bruce. Like, there has to be some coordination between the federal and provincial levels of government. And if we can find a way for provincial licensing bodies to have an active role in that immigration process from the get-go, so that a person arriving in Canada is not doing some other line of work that does not match the skill set that we originally had interest in them for, I would agree. I don't know like what specific details that plan would look like. I think at this stage, what your listeners are looking for is a commitment from their member of parliament to advance that conversation in the House of Commons to make sure that it actually gets done in the first place. And I'm prepared to make that commitment.
Great. Thank you, Alistair. Alana, the floor is yours.
Oh, I'm already off mute.
Yes, you are. Good for you.
Actually, we had some experience with in Alberta with this, with the Filipino nurses coming into Alberta that we started pre-screening, and we actually moved that along quite successfully. And Canada's Conservatives will immediately launch a credential recognition task force to develop new, timely, and appropriate credential recognition strategies. So it's right there in our plans already. And the one area that this task force will study is credential pre-qualification, allowing people in other countries to acquire Canadian standard proficiency through accredited institutions overseas or distance learning with Canadian institutions. So this is something that we're all over and that we're committed to doing right away. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Alana. Blair.
Thanks, Bruce. The one of the hurdles that we have there as well, lots of times, is the language issue. A lot of these people are sometimes coming from elsewhere, and to have a doctor here that doesn't speak English is an issue. So that can sometimes get looked after before they ever get here. But we do have the federal government in charge of immigration. We have the provincial government in charge of a whole bunch of other things, and then we have another step, which is the colleges and the licensing bodies, which are sort of quasi-government, but not dictated to by the province. So it is an issue, and I think everybody understands it's an issue, and it's very frustrating that it's an issue. But even when it gets down to something like heavy-duty mechanics, where doesn't matter what language you speak. If you're a heavy-duty mechanic, you should be able to make know how to fix an engine, and so we have to quicken that pace up. But I think just recognizing that it's a problem and everybody committing to working on it is the way to go here. And it's what we need to do, and we need to do it quickly, because there is such a shortage of people in in our workforce right now. I think during COVID, actually, a lot of people took the opportunity to say, okay, well, I'm 63, close enough. I'm packing up, and I'm not going to work in this job anymore. And now we have a shortage of workers all the way across the country in a number of different fields. So we have to look at this and get things going. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Blair. And Lia, the floor is yours.
Yeah.
Oh, you're on mute, Lia.
I
Thanks.
click all the right buttons.
Yeah.
This alludes to some of the comments that were made in the earlier questions. And of course, Canada's workforce is very dynamic. And most of our population, of course, is right along the border, right along the 49th parallel. And of course, we need to encourage people to move into the north. And we need to encourage people to recognize that there are opportunities all across the country. Now, we have an advantage here in terms of climate, generally speaking, but we need to acknowledge that as climate becomes an issue, particularly for island communities around the world and equatorial countries, more and more people are going to seek refuge here. We need to recognize that our economy is changing. And I don't think that when the Constitution of Canada was written, there was any concept that we would become a global stronghold. We need to stop using the Constitution as an excuse to not do things. You know, the federal government, yes, has responsibility in an overarching sense, and the provinces have responsibilities as well. We need to make things work so that federal governments, provincial governments, regional governments, municipal governments speak to one another, and that we don't stay in these silos of responsibility. This is an opportunity to open up to the world. We're also a member of the Commonwealth, and this is an opportunity for us to embrace employees from all over the place and encourage them to adopt Canada as their home.
Thank you, Lia, very much. Thank you all for your answers on that. I want to shift back into housing, which was raised a little bit earlier too. Federal funding for housing is a good thing, right? But the other part of that is that delivering the supply is very often interrupted due to municipal red tape. So when housing initiatives are launched by the feds, it's then up to municipalities to be involved. So what can you and your party do to encourage local governments to increase the housing supply? Lia, we ended with you last time. Let's start with you this time, please.
Well, of course, we also have to look at this question in terms of global supply management. Materials are at an all-time low. My son moved out of the construction industry because they simply couldn't keep up with the demand. There was, I don't know if you tried to buy a 2x4 lately, but it's almost like buying a car. You know, they're rare and they're expensive. And we need to look at this in terms of communication again. Cooperation between the federal government, provincial and municipal governments. I was listening to a story yesterday about how people who install solar panels would prefer to work in some communities rather than others because some communities are so restrictive in terms of putting these things on to houses. The cost of the building permits is prohibitive. This is not going to change our situation into a green economy fast enough. We need to facilitate changes within municipal bylaws and construction so that we can move forward quickly to a new green economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Lia. Blair, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. As far as our housing situation here right now, we have a huge supply issue. We don't have nearly enough houses for people that want them. I myself am in the real estate industry, and we've been dealing in the last 18 months. Everybody, every time a nice house comes up, there's 20 people that want to buy it all.
Oh, Blair, you froze up right there. Blair, we're going to come back to you in a second, okay? Oh, Blair, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, you froze up there, so why don't we maybe turn your camera off and we'll start over again with your audio only. I think that might help. Are you still there?
Just saying, just with the
Okay.
high cost of housing. Am I good now?
You're still breaking up a little bit. I'm going to suggest that maybe you leave and come back in. So Kiera here can coordinate that for you. So let's get you to reset and come back in. Alana, why don't you pick it up and then we'll go back to Blair after that, okay?
Thank you very much. And this has been on our radar for quite a while, that there are problems moving forward in terms of getting homes built, and partly it is that we need to do more work with the municipalities. Sometimes it takes a year, even more, to get approval to build a single home, let alone a complex. And so we really need to get those timelines down, and so that we're working with municipalities and the private sector to get these rental homes or rental units into the market. And also regarding those rental units, we're going to be cutting international investment in single family homes, and we are going to encourage international investment in multiple rental accommodation.
Thank you for that. Blair, welcome back. Take two. Let's see how this goes. And you're still on mute.
Yeah, sorry, my thing is still coming up that the internet connection is not stable. But I just
okay. Well, let's give it a try.
I just want to make this one point with regards to local government. Like I said, in our riding, we have pretty much half of our population in the Langford Highlands area, and the other half of the population is in the Cowichan. They seem to have a handle on it in Langford, and where it takes not a long time to get a building permit. In our area in the Cowichan, it seems to take forever to get a building permit. And part of the problem, I think, with this too, is that provincial governments and local governments have in the past used the housing industry as a bit of a revenue stream with regards to development fees, and fees for this and fees for that, and then of course the property transfer tax, which pretty much supports the provincial government here. So there's lots of money in the housing industry, and a lot of it is government imposed. And I think we have to pull back on that in order to get the prices down to something reasonable. But it is usually a supply issue, and we have a number of, even in the Cowichan Valley, we have a number of basement suites and that sort of thing, which for the most part are illegal. It's now of enforcing that more to have these suites sit empty in the middle of a housing crisis doesn't make a lot of I think we have to get all these people at the table and figure out a solution. It is get it on Vancouver. Lots of people come here from elsewhere, and once they get here, they want to close the door behind them, and Vancouver Island's full, any more people. And I think I froze up again.
You're a little bit garbled, Blair. So, but thank you for that. Maybe we can turn your camera off, and we'll just get audio from you going forward. To wrap this up, Alistair, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I don't want to be someone who is advocating that we, go over municipalities and their local governments. I still think they have an important role to play, and they were elected by the citizens of those municipalities to take charge of land use planning. I know for the citizens of Langford, because we're talking about the Greater Victoria area, the little toehold that this riding of Cowichan-Malahat-Langford has in the Greater Victoria area is, of course, Langford and the Highlands. I have talked with Mayor Stu Young a number of times on this, and his personal policy on this is that if a development application has not come to some sort of a decision after a certain number of days, it gets forwarded immediately to his desk as mayor, and he personally intervenes to see what the holdup is. I think in terms of concrete federal policies that we can do to help municipalities is we have to recognize that different municipalities have different resources and abilities when it comes to trying to get these projects off the ground. So our specific policy in helping municipalities is we have dedicated fast start funds to help municipalities streamline the process. And I also think that in recognizing the urgency of the problem, the federal government has to step in and say, look, we are going to make these funds available, but there's a timeline attached to them, and we need to see them acted upon. We need to see some action for units being actively built to address this crisis.
Great, thank you very much. One other angle on this, and then we'll move along to another topic. As I mentioned, the Vancouver Island Construction Association and UDI, the Urban Development Institute, are partnering with us on this presentation. So when it comes down to infrastructure and building in general, so construction employs 1.4 million people in this country. That's about $141 billion in the economy. It's 7.5% of GDP, so it's a very significant thing. Infrastructure investment, though, is a question we have right now. We have aging infrastructure. We have seen that there are opportunities to do things right now to make our roads safer. Ventilation in hospitals and public spaces is going to be an issue, as we've seen through the pandemic. Seismic upgrades are going to be necessary very soon, if not well long overdue. So national goals around building sustainability into our infrastructure. So the question is, to achieve this, would you commit to working to create an independent advisory board that can align governments at the provincial and municipal level to address infrastructure deficits across the country? Let's begin with Blair, who we can hear but can't see. Blair.
Okay, I'll try this.
Okay.
Again.
Sure.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is a great idea. To get people at the table for discussions around infrastructure. I think that the government has to look at something that they tried back in 1970s with the MERB program, which is a multi-unit residential building program. And it involved, accelerated depreciation, that sort of stuff. But it did result in a number of residential apartment blocks being built to house the population. And that's why if you look around in most communities, most apartment blocks were built under that program, and there hasn't really been a lot built since then. So that is one of those things that we can do. But I think as far as all infrastructure goes, it's a good idea. Local politicians, local people that would be involved with this infrastructure program would have the ability to identify what was top priority and what would work best in the community, and then we could get things up and running and follow through with it.
Great, thank you, Blair. Alistair, over to you.
Yeah, I think, the notion of an independent advisory board, these can be very helpful to give governments the unvarnished truth of what is really needed in a region. Our construction industry is, it's a very, very busy sector. I know a lot of people are renovating their houses these days. There's a lot of new house construction going on. So the demand for labor is quite high, and usually there are some long wait times. We have to look at government's role in infrastructure. It's really there to try and ease up any bottlenecks that might be present for the movement of goods and people through a community. So when it comes to, public infrastructure, the moving of goods and services, absolutely, we want to make sure that there are as many alternatives as possible for people to use. So, not necessarily just concentrating on building more roads, but in the greater Victoria area, I would like to see federal commitment to maybe getting up the rail corridor up and running between the West Shore communities and Victoria, more access to public bike biking infrastructure so that people have an alternative and safe path to get to work. And then when it comes to our building infrastructure, we have some tremendous opportunities here at upgrading our buildings so that they are, more energy efficient. This is going to create a lot of jobs, and it's also going to help a lot of businesses and residential homes save with their energy costs.
Thank you very much. Lia, the floor is yours.
Yes, absolutely. These kinds of boards are so critical to advancing communication. And again, we're looking at an economy where we're starting to think about the circular effect of building materials, not only from acquiring, but through use and then through end of life. And this is an important conversation that needs to be brought into everything in construction. We know that there are a number of non-conforming suites, not only in the Cowichan Valley, but probably across the country. We also know that this is a crisis on reserves, which comprise a great deal of this riding's population. We know that there is a critical shortage of shelter, of housing everywhere. And this isn't only in the sense that people need to purchase homes. This is also in the sense that people just need shelter. And we have had over the pandemic and even now, as we try to transition out of this period of time, temporary pods put up in Duncan, temporary camps put up in North Cowichan. And, this should be, if it isn't already, a human right, the need to have shelter. So yes, absolutely. Let's talk about this. Let's bring in the new materials, the new technologies, and the new ideas that will move this industry forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And Alana, last word is yours.
Thank you very much. As conservatives, we are always striving to cut regulation and to work cooperatively with industry and businesses. And we are committed to scrapping the failed Canada Infrastructure Bank and commit the money sitting unused on its books to infrastructure projects that can strengthen our economy. We will continue already committed projects and return to the successful model used in the last Conservative government of working in partnership with provinces, municipalities, and First Nations to encourage the use of private-public partnerships. We're going to prioritize the Invest in Canada plan towards infrastructure projects that would have the maximum benefit for economic recovery. We'll target projects that strengthen transit and trade, reduce congestion and gridlock, and advance economic reconciliation with First Nations. We will also reduce bureaucratic red tape in the application process so money can get out the door faster where it's needed. Thanks very much.
Thank you. On Canada Day, this chamber and I did a public acknowledgement of the fact that chambers and organizations like it historically have been a part of suppressing Indigenous culture and economy. It's a fact. This country was built on that. There's been systemic racism in place for generations in this country. We're so much better than we used to be, but we have a long way to go. And we felt it was important to state that acknowledgement. And we have created an economic reconciliation task force of this chamber that will be Indigenous-owned businesses telling us what we should be doing and how we can help them. So in this past year, of course, we had the heartbreaking confirmation of the tragedy of residential schools. We now have the proof of what we had known for a long time. So the question to you is, how will you and your party commit to working with First Nation businesses and Indigenous entrepreneurs to help them, among other things, access financing that has not been available due to the confines of the Indian Act? Let's begin this with Alana, please.
Thank you very much. In Alberta, there are Indigenous bands that have an average income of over $100,000, and that was done by investment in the Indigenous. And It was so successful in Alberta that we are now going to be, Canada, our Conservatives have committed to putting $5 billion into investment funds so that the Indigenous can move forward. And, bottom line, there can be no true and lasting reconciliation without economic reconciliation. And this is doable, and this is something that we're committed to working towards, and I'm looking forward to its success.
Thank you very much. Lia, over to you.
Thank you, Bruce. And I want to acknowledge that you're wearing that moose hide pin, and I appreciate you doing that. It's incredibly important, particularly in this riding, that we acknowledge that racism persists. And we must speak out against this at every opportunity. We must acknowledge that in our demographics, when we're looking at census, Indigenous populations have a higher birth rate and therefore a higher demand for housing and a higher demand for education. And we must not, again, saddle people with student debt. We have to provide opportunities for people to take the training, to do apprenticeships, and to build economy from within. We need to acknowledge that treaties must be realized. We've been talking about this for a very long time. We also need to work on a nation-to-nation basis, as was promised many, many years ago, to rebuild our relationship and walk forward together. Thank you.
Thank you, Lia. Alistair, over to you.
Thank you. A very important question, especially for our particular region. What we want to make sure, I'll start from the top, from the level at Ottawa. We want to ensure that First Nations representation has a seat at the table, so that the decisions that are made in Ottawa, the policies that we develop, and the funding priorities that we identify are done right in partnership with First Nations leadership. When it's filtering down to the levels of our provinces and our local communities and at the riding level, we want to ensure that we have dedicated regional economic development. So, your viewers will know that instead of being lumped under Western economic diversification, British Columbia is now going to go and get its own regional development agency, something I'm very much in support of because of the unique needs of our province being the Asia Pacific Gateway. I think within that, the umbrella organization of that new Asia Pacific Regional Development Agency for British Columbia, we should have a dedicated Indigenous desk there that is really helping work with what First Nations communities need, what they identify as where the gaps are, and really work as a full equal partner beside them as they pursue their own goals.
Alistair, thank you. And Blair, over to you.
Thanks. So one of the issues for First Nations businesses is that the structure is set up under the Indian Act that basically all of the land mass, et cetera, belongs with the community as opposed to having any individual ownership, and that is a problem because people can't have their own properties. They consequently can't get mortgages on those properties. And this is all tied up in the Indian Act. So the contradiction is if a young entrepreneur on First Nations land wants to operate a business, they have to move off of First Nations land in order to be able to operate that business, which seems like a huge contradiction, but it is basically part of the Indian Act and the way the Bank of Canada, not the Bank of Canada, sorry, the banks operate, is that they can't take security on homes on the reserve because it doesn't actually belong to that person. And there's issues there with the First Nations that they don't, some people don't want that to change and some people do want that to change. And so, we have to be able to fix this issue in order for young entrepreneurs on First Nations, give them the opportunity to build wealth in their own right. It just seems like a big contradiction that they have to move off of First Nations land in order to make that possible. So we have to put some thought into that, and it's the same thing with all dealings with First Nations. I think the ideas need to come from the First Nations, and the government will back them up, because of course top-down stuff has not worked very well in the past. We have a history of that being not very good. So we have to have a look at that. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. As I mentioned, we have this task force that we've created here to work with Indigenous-owned businesses. Part of that is that we have offered them membership in the Chamber at no charge. And we've also at the same time created something called the CADI Committee, the Committee for the Advancement of Diversity and Inclusion, to address the systemic racism that's been around for a long time. Some of the things we didn't get to today, we're going to wrap it up right now. Climate change, of course, is top of mind for everyone. Childcare, tourism recovery, infrastructure related to tourism recovery, things like the redevelopment of the Belleville Terminal and the Royal BC Museum and the Conference Center and the Ogden Point and shore power. All of those things are issues regionally, and the whole idea of fiscal responsibility to get us through recovery post-pandemic. All of those policies are available on the websites for all of our candidates for today, and you're welcome to check them out there. But I think we got into some pretty interesting conversations about other related issues today. So for closing remarks, we're going to give you a time right now to do that before we wrap it up, and we will do it in reverse order of what we did at the top. So let's begin with Blair Herbert from the Liberal Party of Canada. Blair.
Well, thanks, Bruce, and to everybody at the Chamber for organizing this event. With the last minute of my time, just want to touch on one more Liberal program that may be of interest to Chamber members, and that's the Liberal Government Daycare Program. The Liberals launched this daycare program and has signed agreements with 8 out of the provinces and territorial governments, including BC. We're investing $27 billion over 5 years to reduce daycare costs by 50% in 2022, with the goal of reaching $10 a day daycare in the next 5 years. The program will create 250,000 new high-quality daycare spaces and hire more than 40,000 more early childhood educators. How this program benefits businesses is because this one measure will give many people the ability to rejoin the workforce. It will allow others to return to school and upgrade their training or train in a new field. It will deliver workers to an economy that desperately needs them. It will help members of the Victoria Chamber fill gaps in employment left by the pandemic. And it will give a number of people the ability to increase their standard of living and reduce poverty. This program is a real win-win-win for all parties, and when it's all said and done, the cost to government will be much less than the money invested up front. This is an investment in our population. By contrast, the Conservatives have already said that they would cancel this program if elected. In closing, I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for your vote to further protect the environment with a top-rated plan for this country. I'm asking for your vote as a business person myself, living the same issues and challenges you are living and being able to speak your language in Ottawa. I'm asking for your vote, and I will not let you down. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Blair Herbert, candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada. Up next for closing remarks, Lia Versaevel from the Green Party of Canada. Lia.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you to the Chamber for this opportunity today. We understand that, of course, our riding overlaps the area that is known as Greater Victoria. And we understand that our workforce is mobile, that people want to move up and down the island, not only to access services, but to access resources and also everything that Victoria and the Greater Victoria area has to offer, including universities and colleges and trade schools, art programs, culture, everything that Victoria has to offer. We understand that we must work together. We understand that we need to work across party lines. And we understand that we still do not have proportional representation. This is a travesty. We understand that we must work hand in hand with everyone in all sectors to move forward into this crisis that we now face, this code red for humanity. In speaking earlier with children in schools in school district 79, We heard their questions framed in the context of what about us? What about our future? How will we work? How will we survive? And I hope that we can take into account that these voices are our most important resource. These children are our future. We must do everything in our power to bring their voices to the table. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Lia. Lia Versaevel is the candidate for the Green Party of Canada. Next, the candidate from the Conservative Party of Canada, Alana DeLong. Alana.
Well, thank you. And let me finish by first thanking again our host for this forum and the other candidates who, like me, have put their names forward in order to be part of the democratic process by which we decide the future of our country. But most importantly, thank you to those who have taken the time to watch. You've heard many different visions of Canada's future, and it's up to you to decide which future you desire. An enormous responsibility when put in those terms. So I ask you to think carefully, sift through the information you've been given, and consider how the information fits with your needs and your life now and into the future. Ask yourself, are my needs and my future met by higher debt and deficit, missed targets, and ignored promises? Are they met by those who have consistently supported the path we are on, helping pass bloated budgets and legislation that have brought us to this point in our country's history? Or am I prepared to go in a different direction, one that gets our financial house in order, brings our cost of living and affordability under control, treats all health issues as health issues, commits to achievable targets, and recognizes the rights and abilities of all Canadians, new and old? The choice is yours and the choice is clear. Vote for more of the same or set off on a brighter path for you and the generations that follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Alana DeLong, candidate of the Conservative Party of Canada. And now for closing remarks, the candidate from the New Democratic Party, Alistair MacGregor. Alistair.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of the chambers of commerce within this riding. Your advocacy on behalf of your members over the last 18 months truly shone through and was an important voice for members of parliament to hear as we were trying to make sure that those pandemic relief programs were suited to your needs. You know, if you look at what New Democrats were able to achieve in the last minority parliament with just a caucus of 24, we were the ones who made those significant improvements to the Canada Emergency Response Benefit so that your employees would have an income while they were laid off due to public health measures. We were the party that pushed to make sure that the emergency wage subsidy was increased. In fact, it was NDP leader Jagmeet Singh that wrote a letter with the leader of Unifor and the leader of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, not erstwhile allies, and together they pushed the government to make those improvements to the emergency wage subsidy. We pushed for those changes to the much maligned commercial rental assistance program. I know the struggle that small businesses have gone through over the last 18 months because I've spoken with many of you on the phone. What I'm asking for you is to again place your the trust you have on my shoulders so that we can improve more things going forward, make sure that we are fighting for a better Canada, really taking those challenges that lie in our way and coming up with better policy. I very much appreciated being your member of parliament over the last 6 years. I hope that I have the opportunity to continue being a strong voice for our region going forward into the 44th Parliament. Thank you all for listening, and I hope that many of your questions were answered from this very informing discussion tonight. Thank you.
Alistair MacGregor, candidate for the New Democratic Party. And these are your candidates in the riding of Cowichan-Malahat-Langford. At the close of all of these events, I do the same thing, and I say thank you to all of you, first of all, for joining us today, but secondly, for your candidacy. This is not for the faint of heart. This is not for people who have thin skin. You're ultimately making a huge personal sacrifice to undertake this role if you're elected. And that's not something for everybody, but it is a part of our democracy. So thank you to all of you for your commitment and your willingness and your interest in doing this. We very much appreciate it. Despite the outcome, whatever it may be, we will move forward in good faith and support each other, I'm sure of it. Thank you all once again for being here. Thanks to those of you that are tuning in live or watching this recording. All of the candidates have been part of one of our broadcasts in the 4 ridings in the Greater Victoria area, and all of those will be posted on the Chamber website for you to enjoy. I want to thank our staff here at the Chamber, to Ciara Dorman, Pavan Nirwan, and Jim Zeben, who put together a lot of the work that made all these things happen. So thank you to them. Thank you to all of you. Enjoy your day. Get out there and vote. If you haven't been vaccinated, get on that too, would you? Thank you. Bye.